Our next topic is shape tweening, and to emphasize a point, we'll start out by answering a test question. If you want to animate an object's position, color, size, and so on, that object should be a symbol and you should animate it with a classic tween. And again, the reason is classic tweening uses much less computer resources. Because this type of tweening uses much more computer resources, you should never use and that's what we're about to talk about, is shape tweening. So you don't use a shape tween unless you need the object to morph in a way that's not possible with a symbol. So you just have to stop and think, what were all the different things that I could do to a symbol? If I need a square turning into a rectangle, is that a true morph? No, because we know with classic tweening, we can morph an object. We can make it go wider than it goes tall. In fact, we have to remember to hold down the shift key if we want to constrain the proportions. But if we have something that's like a blob going to another blob, or a square, a perfect square going to a perfect circle, that is where the shape tween comes in. To demonstrate shape tweens, this is what we're going to do together. We're going to work with two different objects here, this inchworm and this square, or you could call it an L turning into a square. Go ahead and set up a brand new document, name it shape tweening, and set it up exactly like our working file. In the first frame here, I'm going to go ahead and make that L type shape. Easy way to do that is just to make two squares and then move the top square away and delete it. So there is our first keyframe that contains a shape. Let's go out about 2 seconds later. Let's do an F7, totally blank frame, and in that frame we'll put our square in. And then, very similar to making a classic tween, you just right click between the first and second keyframe, only this time you're going to select Create Shape Tween. And that does not add anything extra to your library. In fact, you can see there's nothing in this new document in the library right now. And if we scrub the playhead, we can see that it does a pretty good job of going from the L shape to the square. There's just like an anomaly here that I'm not real happy with, and it's not doing it as much here, but in the first practice one I did, it started to round this out. So let's just pretend that it's rounding it out here just in case it does it on yours. So we have two things. We just want to make sure that this stays nice and crisp here, and we want to make sure that this just comes out in a nice uniform fashion, no little like lip like you see here. So the way to do that is you can give little hints to the computer as to what is the starting and the finishing point. And those are called shape hints. To do that, you just click on your first frame, you go up to Modify, you go to Shape, and you go to Add Shape Hint. And then you place that shape hint on the area in question. You can see that you can feel it kind of snap in place. If you don't get that feel, go up and mess around with your snapping options, and snap to object would be your friend here. Then once you have it snapped on the first frame, you go to your last and you snap it in the same, or the representative spot. And then you scrub your playhead and see, okay, does it make a difference? In this case on mine, it didn't, but if yours was rounding, it definitely will. Now to get rid of the funny thing that's happening in the middle about right in there, we'll go back here and we'll repeat the steps again. Modify, shape, add shape hints. And we'll add the shape hint here. Now, a general rule of thumb for shape hints is you want them to go continuously. So if you needed a whole bunch of shape hints on here, the best way is that they go counterclockwise in order. And that's where a test document will help you get a feel for how much you really need. Now we'll go to that last frame and we'll place this here, and let's scrub the playhead, and you can see it kept the end much crisper than it was before. And if we preview, command return, you'll see we have a pretty decent change from that red L to a green square. I named this layer. I'm going to create another layer. You don't have to do this, although I highly suggest that you experiment a lot in your experimental files. But I just want to show you that shape hints can only do so much. So in this example, I'm going to show you a Pepsi-like circle. And I just want this to morph into a square. But I'm going to introduce a problem to it, and that I'm going to cut out a piece, which essentially turns it into two pieces. Then I'm going to go over here, F7, and then I'll put in my rectangle. Put in my shape tween. And so you can see that that gets really weird if you keep an eye on this new object that we're shape tweening. That's unacceptable. Like, you might think, oh, that's kind of interesting, but it's anyone who's used this program knows that that's just a glitch and that it needs to be better. Now, you might think, okay, well, I could add a shape hint, you know, like maybe here, 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 and here. But the problem really is that you have two shapes that are trying to become one. So here's where you have to use your troubleshooting. You have to think, how could I make this work better? And so basically what's happening is you really just want this to fill in, right? And then become the rectangle. So how about if I back up to where this was a circle still, and I just move that ahead a little bit. And then I'll make a copy of it back. So I just have the circle, then I'll go back out here, do my F7, put in the square. And now what I'm going to do is only tween from the actual circle to the square. So what we have here is this is going to start out with that little erase mark in it that I had. And it's going to move by, and we're barely going to even notice if that's going fast. Maybe we need to go to this one, move it a little bit towards the direction that it's going. And I doubt that anyone would notice that at full speed, but let's say that it was a little bit slower that it happened, or you do notice it. Then what you could come in here and do is click here, do an F6, come out, for example, with your brush tool, set to the same green, and you could start to fill this shape in. And then, oops, I went a little bit too far there, but let's ignore that for now. And F6, go to the next frame, fill it in even more. And now, when we scrub the playhead, it starts to fill in and move, and you've just solved a problem. So when it comes to shape tweening, and you're going from one shape to another, you may get lucky. It may work perfect. If not, try shape hints. If that doesn't work, try coming up with an intermediate step. So we had the dissolved circle or the striped circle, going to the full circle, going to the square. If that doesn't work, break it down even further and do a combination of frame by frame and shape tweening. It's still going to be better or less time consuming than doing all frame by frame. Think of other ways that could make your shape tweening better. I'm going to show you an example of a previous student's animation and see if you can figure out how she might have done this hair with the shape tween. So you can see a lot of beautiful flowing hair, looks great. Now, based on what you know, if you tried to do that with a shape tween, it would really mess with the computer. So here's the solution that she came up with. She took this hair and divided it anywhere from 5 to 8 different layers. So imagine this division that I'm doing with the mouse being one layer. So this chunk of hair was on one layer, this chunk on another, this chunk on another. And what she did is on each additional layer, she overlapped the bottom layer by a bit so that when you watch it, you can't tell that that's a bunch of different layers because there's a continuous overlap happening. But because they were each on their own layers and each their own animation, then she had less to worry about and could just use like maybe 3-4 shape hints on each layer and make something that was very complex. Okay, so let's clean this up and get ready for the next video where the inchworm from the frame by frame project will make a guest appearance as a shape tween.